So my kids are currently busy with exams, and Samuel, my 16-year-old, has taken IT as an 8th subject. He wants to go down that route in his career possibly, and so he's worked pretty hard this year, but he's done very, very well. And going into this exam, he was so excited. And then he gets out of the exam and he looks at me and he says, "Mom, I'm cooked. That was so difficult. That was so hard, Mom." And then he proceeds to tell me, "I think I'm going to stop IT. I think I'm going to quit." And, I just think that is a reflection of what we do sometimes. I don't know how many times I've encountered people that they pray for a new job, they get into the new job, and they possibly, maybe encounter a boss that's not so good. And the first inclination is, I'm just going to look for a new job. Or, we encounter difficulty and things that are hard, and our first thing is to want to quit. Maybe because we're scared of failing, maybe because we want to progress, and difficulty often slows that down, and it slows us down, and it means that we really have to rely on God and trust Him, which is really good for us. We learn new ways to look at Him, new ways to depend on Him when things are difficult, because in my weakness He's strong, right? But I was looking at Exodus this morning, and we've been talking about how God leads us, and that often, the different ways that God leads. And in Exodus 13, verses 17, God has just taken the Israelites out of Egypt, which is a place of slavery where they were slaves for over 400 years. They were in bondage. He takes them out and he says there's two options. He says, I could have taken them down the country road, the Philistine country route, where they would have encountered war. But he says that if I did it that way, and it was nearer, they probably would have backed out and gone back to Egypt because they weren't ready for what they would have encountered there. And he says instead he takes them through the wilderness, which is the difficult route, right? Why did God do that? He knew there were tests that they were not ready for, that they would not have passed, and they would have shrunk back and gone back. And the Lord never wants us to do that. So sometimes the wilderness is hard and it's difficult and the progress seems slow, but what's actually happening is you being transformed. What actually is happening is you are encountering a God who wants to be there for you. And so one of the biggest things you need to know in the wilderness and practice is God's presence, because progress in the wilderness is God's presence. So you've got to get with Him daily and ask Him, Lord, I just want to see you. Reveal yourself to me. Reveal what you're doing in my life today. I want to see you, Lord. I want to see your face. And the Lord will encounter us in that space, and then we are progressing because He's doing something in our heart and He's teaching us. God knew they were going to encounter so many battles in the promised land once they had reached that, and He needed to prepare them for those tests. So He doesn't choose a shortcut. He chooses the longer route. And oftentimes what you really have to guard in difficulty is your mind from retreating back, because we often retreat in our minds. Our minds tell us, I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to go back, instead of staying focused and established in His presence on purpose, for a purpose that He calls us to. And so guard your mind in the wilderness and in the difficulty, not to shrink back, because it happens here before it happens in action first. And then in the wilderness, take those small steps of obedience. Just small steps, because often it feels overwhelming, like, God, will I ever get out of this? But just recognize where He is, that you're not abandoned and He's with you, and take those small steps forward with Him. And before you know it, you are transformed. You see Him in a new way. You've learned trust and dependence, and you are ready for your promised land.